9:40 p.m., October 23, 1942. The desert explodes. More than 1,000 British guns fire at once, the night ripped open by orange flashes and rolling thunder. The ground shakes under boots and steel. Hot wind carries the bitter smell of cordite and dust. Men press their faces into the sand as shells scream overhead, some landing close enough to punch the air out of their lungs. In the darkness near a lonely railway halt called El Alamein, the war in North Africa finally decides it will not drift any longer. It will break. Or it will burn. Silence had ruled this desert for weeks, broken only by engines, flies, and the wind. Now there is no silence at all. Just fire, and the knowledge that whatever happens here will echo far beyond these dunes. North Africa was never meant to be a sideshow. From the beginning, it was about control, of sea lanes, oil, and empire. Whoever held Egypt controlled the Suez Canal, the lifeline between Britain and its Asian dominions. Lose it, and the British Empire would be cut in half. For the Axis, pushing east meant more than victory. It meant fuel. It meant leverage. It meant the chance to redraw the map of the Middle East. By 1942, this desert had already swallowed armies whole. The campaign began in 1940 when Italian forces crossed into Egypt, only to be smashed back by British troops who advanced hundreds of miles across Libya. Then Germany intervened. In early 1941, a new commander arrived, Erwin Rommel. Aggressive, fast-moving, and dangerously creative, Rommel transformed the battlefield. His Afrika Korps struck hard and kept striking, using speed and surprise to offset shortages in men and equipment. The desert rewarded boldness. Flat terrain allowed armor to maneuver freely, but it punished mistakes without mercy. There was little cover. No forests. No cities. A broken-down tank could mean death by exposure or capture. Supply lines stretched hundreds of miles, vulnerable to air attack and naval interdiction. Water was rationed. Fuel was gold. By the summer of 1942, Rommel had driven the British back to Egypt itself. Tobruk fell in June. The Axis advance reached a narrow bottleneck between the Mediterranean Sea and the impassable Qattara Depression. This was El Alamein. There would be no more sweeping flanks here. No easy retreats. The desert narrowed the war to a single choke point. The British Eighth Army stopped Rommel here in July, but barely. Both sides were exhausted. Tanks were worn. Men were sick with dysentery, heat exhaustion, and fatigue. Yet the pause was deceptive. Under the surface, everything was changing. In August 1942, a new commander took over the British forces in the Middle East, Bernard Montgomery. He did not promise miracles. He promised preparation. Montgomery reorganized the Eighth Army with relentless focus. Training intensified. Units drilled until movements became instinct. Communications were tightened. Logistics, so often ignored, became central. Most importantly, Montgomery refused to attack until he was ready. Behind the lines, the desert hummed with activity. Engineers laid miles of minefields. Supplies poured in through Alexandria and the Nile Delta. American-built Sherman tanks arrived, offering better armor and reliability. British intelligence, aided by ultra-decrypts, gained clearer insight into Axis weaknesses. Rommel's army, by contrast, was bleeding fuel. Allied air and naval forces were strangling Axis supply convoys across the Mediterranean. Every gallon of petrol had to be fought for. Rommel knew it. He wrote of it. His tanks could still fight, but not for long. While soldiers faced each other across the sand at El Alamein, another plan was taking shape far from the desert heat. Across the Atlantic, the United States had entered the war less than a year earlier. American forces were untested against German ground troops. Their commanders debated where to strike first. France was too strong. The Pacific demanded attention. North Africa became the compromise. Operation Torch was born. Torch was ambitious and risky. In November 1942, Allied forces, primarily American, supported by British units, would land in French North Africa, Morocco and Algeria. The goal was to trap Axis forces between two advancing armies. From the east, Montgomery would push from El Alamein. From the west, Torch would drive toward Tunisia. Between them, Rommel's army would have nowhere to go, but nothing about Torch was simple. The landings would occur in territories controlled by Vichy France, whose loyalties were uncertain. Would French forces resist? Would they defect? Would they fight? Allied planners didn't know. Meanwhile, secrecy was critical. If the Axis learned of Torch too early, they could reinforce Tunisia and turn the trap into a slaughter. As October turned toward November, the Desert Campaign and the invasion plan began to converge in time. El Alamein would not just be a battle. It would be the opening move in a much larger sequence. Back at the front, men sensed it. The stillness before Montgomery's attack was unsettling. Veterans noticed the difference. There were more tanks. More guns. More aircraft overhead. This was not another raid or probe. This felt final. On the Axis side, Rommel was sick and exhausted. He would soon be away from the front as the battle approached, leaving his army to fight under commanders who knew the situation was grim but unavoidable. Retreat was no longer a real option. Orders from Berlin were clear: hold the line. The desert, indifferent as ever, waited. As British artillery thundered into the night on October 23, no one on either side could yet see the full picture. They could not know how events in Morocco and Algeria would soon collide with this battlefield. They could not know how close the Axis was to running out of fuel, or how hard they would fight once they did. Only one thing was certain: the war in North Africa was no longer drifting back and forth across the sand. It was about to close in on itself. October 24, 1942. Dawn creeps over the desert like a bruise turning yellow. Smoke hangs low, stinging eyes and throats. Burnt metal and cordite mix with the sour smell of sweat and fear. In the shallow trenches near El Alamein, men lift their heads cautiously. The bombardment has ended, but the battle has only begun. The British assault plan is already in motion. Montgomery calls it Operation Lightfoot. Infantry will move first, stepping through minefields on foot, light enough not to trigger most anti-tank mines, while engineers crawl forward under fire, clearing narrow corridors for armor to follow. It is slow. Painfully slow. And every step forward costs lives. The minefields are deeper than expected. Some stretch for miles, layered with anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, wired together, booby-trapped. Engineers work with bayonets and bare hands, sweating under steel helmets, listening for the faint click that means death. Flares burst overhead. Machine guns chatter. Tanks wait behind them, engines idling, vulnerable. Progress that first night is measured in yards. German and Italian defenders respond with disciplined fire. The Afrika Corps may be short on fuel, but their guns still speak clearly. Anti-tank crews wait until British armor emerges from cleared lanes, then open fire at close range. Tanks burn, silhouettes black against the rising sun. Inside them, temperatures spike instantly. Escape is not guaranteed, yet something is different. The British do not panic. They do not retreat. When attacks stall, they dig in. When tanks are lost, replacements move forward. Montgomery's plan is not about speed, it is about pressure. Constant. Relentless. The Axis line begins to bend, not break, but it bends everywhere at once. Overhead, the desert sky belongs increasingly to the Allies. The Royal Air Force flies continuous sorties, fighter sweeps, bomber raids, reconnaissance flights. Axis supply columns are hunted relentlessly. Trucks explode in flashes of dust and flame. Fuel dumps vanish overnight. Rommel's army is fighting with what it has on hand, and nothing more is coming fast enough. On October 25 and 26, the battle grinds on. Attacks surge forward, then stall. Counterattacks bite back hard. Casualties mount. Men sleep in snatches, if at all, surrounded by flies and the wounded. Water is rationed to the mouthful. Tempers fray. Nerves shake. Rommel returns to the front on October 25, despite illness. He sees immediately how serious the situation is. British numbers are overwhelming. Their artillery never seems to stop. Worse still, fuel stocks are nearly gone. Some German units are already immobilized, their tanks dug in as static guns. Rommel requests permission to withdraw, Berlin refuses, Hitler orders him to stand fast. El Alamein must not fall. For Rommel, it is a death sentence written in ink he cannot erase. Meanwhile, Montgomery watches and waits. He resists pressure to rush. Instead, he prepares a second, decisive blow. The battlefield has become a test of endurance, and endurance now favors the Allies. On November 1st, the balance finally tips. British artillery unleashes another massive barrage, followed by a concentrated armored thrust aimed at the weakened Axis center. This time, the attacks are narrower, sharper. The minefields are breached faster. German anti-tank guns fire until barrels glow red, and then fall silent for lack of ammunition or crews. By November 2nd, Rommel knows the truth. The line is breaking. Fuel reserves are effectively gone. Units cannot maneuver. Withdrawal is the only way to save what remains of his army. Again, he asks permission. Again, the order comes back. No retreat. Rommel disobeys. On November 3rd, under cover of darkness, Axis forces begin pulling west. It is chaotic. Trucks run dry. Tanks are abandoned. Wounded men are loaded onto whatever moves. The desert that once favored speed now punishes it. British armor presses forward relentlessly, smashing through rear guards, overrunning gun lines. On November 4th, Montgomery orders full pursuit. El Alamein is over. It is not just a tactical victory, it is a psychological one. For the first time, a German field army has been decisively defeated and driven back in open battle. Churchill will later say, "Before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." It is an exaggeration, but only slightly. As Rommel retreats across Libya, another shock hits the Axis. November 8, 1942. Before dawn, Allied ships loom off the coasts of Morocco and Algeria. Waves churn with landing craft. Engines rumble. Boots hit metal decks. American and British soldiers, many experiencing combat for the first time, clutch rifles and wait for the ramps to drop. Operation Torch has begun. Landings take place at Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers. Confusion reigns. In some places, Vichy French forces resist fiercely. Coastal guns fire. Warships exchange shells. American troops take casualties before they even reach the beaches. In other areas, negotiations and hesitation blunt the fighting. Loyalties fracture in real time. Within days, resistance collapses. French commanders switch sides. Axis leaders scramble. Germany reacts immediately, rushing troops into Tunisia by air and sea. It is fast, but not fast enough. Torch has changed the map overnight. Rommel's retreating army is now being squeezed from both ends. For American forces, Torch is a harsh education. At places like Kasserine Pass in early 1943, German counterattacks expose weaknesses in training and command. But lessons are learned quickly. Leadership improves. Coordination tightens. The Allies adapt. Back in the desert, Rommel fights delaying actions, buying time inch by inch. But the math no longer works. Fuel shortages worsen. Air superiority belongs entirely to the Allies. Supplies vanish faster than they can be replaced. By early 1943, Axis forces are compressed into Tunisia, trapped between Montgomery advancing from the east and Anglo-American forces pushing from the west. The vice is closing. North Africa, once a place of sweeping advances and dramatic reversals, has become a prison, and the question now is no longer if the Axis will be defeated here, but how much of their army can escape before the trap snaps shut. May 12, 1943. Rain falls over the hills of northern Tunisia, turning dirt roads into mud and trenches into shallow graves. The air smells of wet earth, smoke, and exhaustion. Somewhere ahead, artillery fires one last time, not in fury, but habit. Men listen, waiting for orders that never come. In pockets across the countryside, Axis soldiers realize the same truth at the same moment: there is nowhere left to go. For 6 months after El Alamein and Torch, North Africa has tightened like a noose. From the east, Montgomery's 8th Army pushes steadily across Libya, reclaiming ground once lost in days that now takes weeks. From the west, British and American forces regroup after hard lessons, reorganize their commands, and advance with growing confidence. Between them, Axis troops dig in, counterattack, delay, and bleed. Rommel is gone now, recalled to Germany in March 1943. His replacements inherit an impossible situation. Airfields are cratered daily. Ports are bombed relentlessly. Supplies arrive in trickles, if at all. Tanks sit idle for lack of fuel. Infantry fight on reduced rations, living in foxholes scraped from rocky ground. The Allies have learned, too. American units that faltered earlier now coordinate artillery, armor, and air power with precision. British and American commanders work through a unified command structure, smoothing over differences that once caused deadly confusion. Above them all, Allied aircraft dominate the sky. Daylight movement for Axis forces becomes suicidal. Even at night, engines risk detection. The final battles are brutal and intimate. Hills change hands multiple times. Positions are taken, lost, and taken again. But the outcome is no longer in doubt, only the cost. On May 7, Tunis falls. On May 9, Bizerta follows. Axis forces are compressed into shrinking pockets along the coast. Ammunition runs low. Medical supplies are gone. The wounded lie where they fall. On May 12, white flags appear. The next day, May 13, 1943, it becomes official. More than 250,000 German and Italian troops surrender in North Africa. It is one of the largest mass capitulations in military history, on a scale comparable to Stalingrad. An entire Axis army group ceases to exist. For the Allies, the meaning is immediate and enormous. North Africa is secured. The Mediterranean sea lanes are reopened. The Suez Canal is safe. Axis dreams of reaching Middle Eastern oil are finished. The southern flank of Europe is now exposed, but victory comes with scars. Veterans of the desert carry memories that do not fade easily. The heat. The flies. The constant thirst. The way tanks burned. The way the wounded cried out at night. The desert gave no comfort, no shelter, no mercy, and yet, it gave something else. North Africa becomes the proving ground of Allied warfare. Here, modern combined arms doctrine takes shape. Infantry, armor, artillery, engineers, air power, and logistics working as one system rather than separate parts. Here, commanders learn the hard truth behind a simple rule: battles are won as much by supply lines and planning as by courage. Alamein proves that the German army can be stopped, and beaten, in open battle. Torch proves that the Allies can coordinate vast amphibious operations across oceans. Tunisia proves that once the Allies adapt, they do not stop adapting. The consequences ripple outward. Within weeks, planning accelerates for the invasion of Sicily. From there, Italy itself will be forced out of the war. German resources are stretched thinner. Experienced troops and irreplaceable equipment have been lost forever in the sand. For Britain, Alamein restores confidence after years of retreat and survival. For the United States, North Africa is a harsh but necessary apprenticeship, one that turns raw divisions into a modern fighting force. For the Axis, it is the end of expansion and the beginning of containment, and for the men who fought there, it is something quieter. A moment to breathe. Letters are written. Helmets are cleaned. Some soldiers stand on the same beaches where they landed months earlier and look out at the sea, realizing they are still alive. Others bury friends whose names will never appear in headlines. The desert remains unchanged. Wind smooths over shell craters. Tracks fade. Wrecks rust in silence, yet the meaning of what happened there does not fade. North Africa decides the shape of the war that follows. The confidence gained here carries forward into Sicily, Italy, and eventually Normandy. The systems refined here, logistics, coordination, air-ground integration, become the backbone of Allied victory in Europe. Alamein and Torch are not remembered for single dramatic moments, but for something more powerful: momentum. The moment the war stopped swinging wildly and began moving in one direction, forward, and perhaps that is the final lesson of the desert. Not that victory comes quickly or cleanly, but that once preparation, patience, and cooperation align, even the most unforgiving terrain cannot stop history from turning. The war will move north now. Across seas. Onto new shores, but the path it follows was carved here, in sand, steel, and fire.